Deep in the jungles of Mexico, enormous stone faces lie buried in silence. No one knows who they were, or why they watched the horizon for thousands of years. But behind those eyes lies the beginning of everything. The first great civilization of the New World, the Olmec, the forgotten giants of history. The Olmec left no written words, only silent stones. But their story isn't over. It's waiting to be told. Subscribe now and uncover the mysteries buried beneath the sands of time. Long before the rise of the Maya or the Aztec, before pyramids dotted the jungles of Mexico, there lived a people shrouded in mystery, the Olmec. They were the first great civilization of Mesoamerica, often called the Mother Culture, for many that followed carried their legacy. Their story begins more than 3,000 years ago, along the lush and humid lowlands of the Gulf of Mexico, in what is now Veracruz and Tabasco. Here, the land breathed life through winding rivers, dense forests, and fertile plains. The people who would become the Olmec settled near these rivers, where water gave them not only survival, but also inspiration. The Olmec heartland was a world of contrasts. Gentle rivers like the Coatzacoalcos flowed through rich jungles, while heavy rains painted the land green for most of the year. The soil was fertile, allowing corn, beans, and squash to grow in abundance. These crops were not just food, they were life itself, connecting humans with the earth and the divine. But nature was not always kind. The same rivers that nourished them could also flood without warning. This taught the Olmec people an important lesson: to live in harmony with nature, to respect its power, and to shape their world with balance. From this relationship came the foundations of their beliefs, that gods controlled nature, that mountains and rivers had spirits, and that the universe was connected through cycles of life and renewal. Over generations, small farming villages began to grow. Families gathered, traded, and built communities. From these humble beginnings, the first Olmec cities emerged. The oldest known was San Lorenzo, rising around 1,200 years before the birth of Christ. It was unlike any settlement before it, a planned city with mounds, courtyards, and monuments carved from volcanic stone. Imagine walking through San Lorenzo at its peak. Giant heads of stone, each taller than a person and weighing many tons, lined the ceremonial plazas. Their faces were calm, yet powerful, carved with helmets and wide lips, gazing into eternity. Each one was unique, perhaps representing rulers or deified ancestors. How these colossal sculptures were made and transported without wheels or metal tools remains a marvel to this day. The Olmec were not only skilled carvers, they were engineers, artists, and thinkers. They built drainage systems to control the flow of rainwater and developed complex methods of agriculture. Their homes, made from wood and thatch, stood beside temples built for rituals that connected them to the gods of rain, fertility, and maize. Spiritual life was the heart of Olmec culture. Their world was alive with sacred meaning. They saw power in animals, especially the jaguar, which became their most important symbol. The jaguar represented strength, mystery, and the link between the human world and the spirit realm. In Olmec art, half-human, half-jaguar figures appear again and again, perhaps symbolizing the union of man and God. They also believed in a sacred mountain that connected heaven, earth, and the underworld, a cosmic axis that structured the universe. From this idea grew the temples and pyramids seen later in other Mesoamerican cultures. The Olmec were the first to carve this belief into stone, shaping a vision of the cosmos that would endure for millennia. Their priests and rulers likely played both political and religious roles. Through rituals, they sought to maintain balance between humans and the divine. Offerings of jade, ceramics, and carved figurines were buried in sacred spaces. Silent prayers for rain, harvest, and harmony. Much of what we know about the Olmec comes from what they left behind: stone sculptures, pottery, and mysterious symbols. Some archaeologists believe that the Olmec were the first in the Americas to develop a written system. Inscriptions found on carved stones show what might be early hieroglyphs, symbols that tell stories of rulers, gods, and cosmic events. They were also among the first to use the concept of zero, a mathematical idea that would later become essential to the Maya and beyond. The Olmec's art spoke of their view of life, balanced, spiritual, and deeply connected to nature. Faces carved into jade were not mere decorations. They were prayers frozen in stone, tributes to ancestors and symbols of eternal life. Even as their cities rose, the Olmec remained surrounded by mystery. Who were their rulers? How did they organize their society? What caused them to build such immense monuments? Archaeologists continue to uncover clues, from buried altars to jade masks. Yet the Olmec left no clear written history. It is as if their story was whispered into the wind and carried through time. What we do know is that their influence spread far beyond their homeland. Traders carried Olmec jade, pottery, and ideas across Mesoamerica. The seeds of their culture would later bloom in the civilizations of the Maya, Zapotec, and Aztec. The Olmec were the spark, the dawn of civilization in the Americas. Their understanding of time, their artistry, and their reverence for nature shaped the world that followed. And though their cities have long vanished beneath the jungle, their stone giants still stand, silent yet eternal, guardians of a forgotten world. When the early city of San Lorenzo began to fade into silence, the heart of the Olmec world shifted eastward, to a new and greater place. Around 900 years before the birth of Christ, a city called La Venta rose from the wetlands of Tabasco like a sacred vision. It would become the spiritual and cultural center of the Olmec civilization, a place of gods, rulers, and monumental beauty. La Venta was unlike anything the world had seen before. It was built on a small island surrounded by swamps, yet its layout showed astonishing precision. The entire city was aligned with the stars and the sun, as if the Olmec sought to reflect the heavens on earth. At its heart stood a massive pyramid rising more than 100 feet high, the earliest known pyramid in Mesoamerica. It was not made of stone like later pyramids, but from earth carefully shaped and compacted. To those who approached from the river, the pyramid appeared like a sacred mountain rising above the jungle mist. Surrounding it were plazas, temples, and ceremonial courtyards where priests and rulers performed rituals to honor the gods. To the Olmec, every direction, north, south, east, and west, carried spiritual meaning. La Venta was not just a city, it was a map of the cosmos, a living temple designed to maintain balance between humans, nature, and the divine. The Olmec society had grown complex. At its top were powerful rulers who were believed to possess both political authority and divine energy. They were the intermediaries between the people and the gods, responsible for ensuring the prosperity of the land. In La Venta, enormous stone monuments celebrated these rulers. The most famous are the colossal heads, each carved from basalt brought from mountains more than 60 miles away. Some weigh over 20 tons. Each head bears a distinct face, perhaps that of a king or warrior, wearing a helmet-like headdress. How the Olmec transported these massive stones without wheels or beasts of burden remains one of archaeology as great mysteries. Some believe they used wooden rollers and rafts, moving them slowly through jungle and river. The effort itself speaks of immense organization and devotion, proof of a society capable of unity and purpose. La Venta was more than a ceremonial center. Around its temples lived artisans, farmers, traders, and families. The people built their homes on raised platforms to protect against floods. Markets buzzed with exchange. Jade, obsidian, salt, cacao, and shells flowed in and out, linking the Olmec to distant lands. Their artistry reached new heights. Craftsmen carved jade masks, polished hematite mirrors, and molded delicate ceramic figurines. Each piece carried spiritual meaning. The mask might represent a god, the mirror a doorway to the spirit world. The Olmec also created mosaic floors of serpentine stone, hidden beneath temples as sacred offerings. When modern archaeologists discovered them, they were astonished. Perfect geometric patterns made of thousands of small stones, buried intentionally, never meant to be seen again. The Olmec did not build for human eyes alone, they built for eternity. Religion guided every part of Olmec life. They believed that the universe was divided into three realms: the sky above, the earth in the middle, and the watery underworld below. Their gods represented the forces of nature: rain, maize, fertility, and the sun. Ceremonies were held to keep these forces in harmony. Priests burned incense and offered jade or food to the gods. Some rituals involved the symbolic journey between worlds, through caves, mountains, or mirrors, to communicate with spirits. The jaguar remained their most sacred symbol. In Olmec art, it appeared everywhere, in masks, sculptures, and carvings. The jaguar represented strength and transformation. It was said that rulers could channel the spirit of the jaguar to gain divine insight, becoming half human, half beast, bridging the human world and the realm of gods. As La Venta grew, so did Olmec influence. Traders carried their art and ideas far across Mesoamerica. In distant lands, others began carving stones in the Olmec style and using similar religious symbols: the cleft-headed deity, the were-jaguar, the maize god. This was the Olmec Classic period, the golden age when their culture radiated across mountains and rivers. Through trade and travel, they became teachers of architecture, art, and spiritual thought. The Olmec did not conquer by war, but by inspiration. Their creativity shaped the identity of an entire continent. In this era, the Olmec may have created one of the first writing systems in the Americas. Small symbols on stones and pottery hint at a language of their own, perhaps used by priests to record rituals or royal lineages. They also developed a calendar system to track the cycles of time, marking days of ceremony and harvest. Their understanding of astronomy allowed them to align temples with the rising sun and the sacred stars of the east. Every structure, every ritual, every sculpture spoke of harmony, between heaven and earth, between man and nature. By 700 years before Christ, La Venta stood at the peak of its glory. It was a city that united art, religion, and science, a reflection of the Olmec vision of the world. Yet, like all great civilizations, its light would not last forever. The rivers would shift, the climate would change, and the sacred city would one day fall silent. But its legacy would live on, in the hearts of those who came after. For the Olmec, nothing truly ended. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth continued, just as the sun rose each morning to light the jungle once more. As centuries passed, the Olmec heartland hummed with life. Cities like La Venta, Tres Zapotes, and Laguna de los Cerros stood as glowing beacons of order and art. But beyond their jungle borders, other peoples were stirring. Tribes, traders, and dreamers drawn to the beauty and mystery of the Olmec world. Slowly, the winds began to change. They carried more than the scent of rain and salt from the Gulf. They carried ideas. The Olmec lived at a natural crossroads. Their rivers reached the coast, their forests bordered the highlands, and their trade routes threaded through mountains and valleys. Along these paths came visitors from distant lands, bringing shells from the Pacific, feathers from tropical birds, and obsidian, a black volcanic glass that gleamed like night. The Olmec welcomed trade as a sacred act. To them, exchange was more than economics. It was a ritual of connection. Each good carried energy, the soul of its homeland, and sharing it meant uniting the world. Through this philosophy, their culture became a living bridge across Mesoamerica. Archaeologists later found traces of Olmec art far from their own territory. Carved jade pendants, figurines, and motifs found hundreds of miles away. These were not the marks of conquest, but of cultural influence. Other peoples admired the Olmec's mastery of stone and spirit, and they began to adopt their symbols. Among the most widespread symbols was the Olmec jaguar, half human, half animal, a being of power and transformation. In distant lands, others began to carve similar forms, believing in creatures that crossed the boundary between worlds. Another was the maize god, representing life and fertility. The Olmec taught that corn was sacred, a gift from the gods, the very body of humanity. This belief spread far beyond the Gulf Coast, becoming a cornerstone of later civilizations like the Maya and the Aztec. Even the Olmec concept of sacred space, the idea that mountains, caves, and rivers were divine portals, began to echo across the continent. The Olmec way of seeing the world was transforming Mesoamerica's spirit. Trade did more than move goods. It moved ideas. Through contact with other peoples, the Olmec learned of new materials, plants, and techniques. They refined their craft in jade and ceramics, developing more graceful shapes and more expressive faces. Some historians believe the Olmec may have exchanged knowledge of mathematics and astronomy with neighboring groups. They learned to track the stars and predict the changing of seasons with remarkable accuracy. Each alignment of sun and shadow became a sign, a whisper from the gods that guided planting, harvest, and ceremony. The Olmec may also have shared early forms of writing. On carved stones known as stelae, researchers have found mysterious symbols arranged in patterns, a language still not fully understood. It may have recorded royal events or religious rituals, marking one of the first written traditions in the Americas. In this era, the Olmec lands were not isolated. To the west lay peoples of Oaxaca and Guerrero. To the east, the ancestors of the Maya. From the mountains came traders with obsidian and tools. From the coast, fishermen with shells and salt. Some came to La Venta as guests, others as pilgrims. They watched the ceremonies, the burning of incense, the offerings of jade, the solemn dances beneath the rising sun. They returned home carrying stories of the stone giants and their sacred city. Slowly, the Olmec became more than a people. They became a legend. Other civilizations began to model their rulers, gods, and temples after Olmec ideals. The Olmec's influence flowed outward like ripples in still water. The Olmec never sought to dominate others. Instead, they inspired through faith and beauty. Their gods, their art, and their architecture were living messages, expressions of harmony and cosmic order. They believed that every civilization was a branch of a great spiritual tree. To share their symbols was not to lose power, but to spread balance. In their eyes, all creation was connected. The rain that fell, the crops that grew, the trade that bound people together. Through this openness, the Olmec became silent teachers. Their lessons would later appear in distant temples, written in new languages, yet carrying the same ancient heart. As centuries went on, this network of exchange grew stronger. Jade from the Motagua Valley of Guatemala found its way into Olmec hands. In return, Olmec art traveled westward to highland valleys and southward to the coasts. This movement of goods and ideas created the first cultural web of Mesoamerica, a network that would later support the great civilizations to come. The Olmec stood at its center, both receiving and giving knowledge, like a great heart pumping the lifeblood of culture through the land. Yet with all the connections and prosperity, change was approaching. Nature, ever the silent ruler of the Olmec world, began to shift once again. Rivers altered their courses, and the earth beneath La Venta trembled. In time, the trade winds that once carried prosperity would bring something else: uncertainty. The people who had spread light across the land would soon face trials that would test their harmony with nature and with themselves. But for now, in this age of exchange and influence, the Olmec stood at the peak of their glory. The teachers of gods, the sculptors of time, the civilization that taught the world to dream in stone. Oh, the Olmec world had reached its golden age. From the banks of the Coatzacoalcos River to the mist-covered hills of Tabasco, Their sacred cities glimmered like jewels in the green heart of Mesoamerica. The people who once lived quietly among rivers and rain had now mastered their environment, building temples, carving gods from stone, and spreading ideas that would echo across centuries. This was the age of expansion, when the Olmec spirit flourished beyond their heartland, guiding the birth of civilizations that would follow. The Olmec were among the first in the Americas to turn nature into an ally. They learned the rhythm of the seasons, how to read the sky, and how to harness the earth's abundance. Their farmlands, nourished by tropical rains, grew maize, beans, squash, cacao, and chili, the sacred foundation of their diet and rituals. But they did more than plant. They engineered. They dug canals and irrigation ditches to control the flow of water. They raised platforms to protect fields from floods. With careful planning, they turned swamps into fertile gardens and jungles into villages. This mastery over nature brought prosperity. Populations grew. Villages turned into cities. And as people gathered, ideas multiplied. The Olmec had become the teachers of their age. Through trade and exploration, they carried their art, beliefs, and inventions far beyond their homeland. Among their greatest gifts was writing. In several Olmec sites, archaeologists have found stones engraved with mysterious symbols, what may be the earliest writing in the Americas. These carvings, known as Epi-Olmec script, suggest that the Olmec recorded their rulers, rituals, and histories long before others did. They were also pioneers of mathematics and astronomy. By watching the stars and the cycles of the sun, the Olmec created early calendars to track time and predict seasons. These ideas would later be refined by the Maya and the Zapotec, but their roots began here, in the minds of the Olmec astronomer priests who gazed upward from temple tops, measuring eternity through the movement of the heavens. At the center of this growing world stood La Venta, still the sacred capital. Here, art and science walked hand in hand. Sculptors carved colossal heads with precision and emotion. Builders aligned temples to the rising sun. Traders filled markets with goods from distant lands, jade from Guatemala, obsidian from Oaxaca, and shells from the Pacific coast. The Olmec even experimented with new materials. They shaped rubber, one of the first known uses of the natural latex from jungle trees. They mixed it with plant sap to create a strong, flexible material used for balls, sandals, and ritual objects. Some historians believe they played a sacred ball game, a symbolic contest between life and death, echoing the cycles of the sun and moon. The Olmec's technological genius wasn't about machines or metal. It was about understanding balance, using the gifts of nature without destroying them. As Olmec cities grew wealthier, trade networks stretched across mountains and seas. They traded not only goods but also beliefs. The idea that every object had spirit. To own an Olmec jade figurine was not simply to possess art, it was to hold a piece of sacred energy. The same was true for mirrors made of polished hematite, used not for vanity, but for spiritual reflection, to see the soul. Through trade, their influence reached the highlands of central Mexico and the jungles of Guatemala. The Olmec became the invisible architects of cultural unity in ancient America, linking peoples through shared myths and symbols. Perhaps the greatest achievement of this era was the Olmec understanding of time itself. They believed time was not a straight line but a living circle. Birth, growth, decay, and renewal. This belief shaped everything they built. Their temples rose in circular or symmetrical forms, representing eternal cycles. Their art blended human and divine forms, showing that life and death were part of the same sacred dance. Even their calendars reflected this circular vision. Days, months, and years intertwined like the roots of a great tree. This idea, that all existence moves in cycles, would later become central to Maya and Aztec philosophy. In this way, the Olmec did not just measure time, they defined how Mesoamerica would understand it for millennia. In their mythology, the universe was divided into three realms: the heavens above, the earth where humans lived, and the watery underworld below. The world tree, or cosmic axis, connected them all. Every temple symbolized this tree. The top reached the heavens where gods dwelled. The base touched the underworld, where ancestors slept. The Olmec ruler stood at the center, the living bridge between realms, the keeper of balance. This spiritual worldview guided their politics, art, and daily life. It was a civilization built on equilibrium, between man and nature, between heaven and earth, between power and humility. By 600 years before Christ, the Olmec had reached the height of their influence. Their ideas had traveled far, shaping distant cultures that they would never meet. The Olmec world was vast, yet peaceful, connected through shared belief rather than conquest. But nature, ever unpredictable, was beginning to stir again. Rivers shifted courses. Volcanic ash darkened the skies. The very land that had once given them abundance now began to challenge their survival. The age of expansion had brought glory. The next age would bring trials. The jungle that had reclaimed the Olmec cities did not erase them. Beneath the tangled roots and drifting mists, the legacy of the stone giants still breathed. It lived in the carvings, the myths, and the quiet pulse of the land itself. Though their temples had fallen silent, their ideas wandered, carried by traders, artisans, and dreamers who remembered the old ways. These wanderers became the seeds of new worlds, planting echoes of the Olmec wherever they went, and from those echoes, new civilizations were born. High in the mountains of Oaxaca, a people began to carve their destiny into stone. They were the Zapotecs, and their city, Monte Alban, rose like an island above the clouds. In their temples and plazas, archaeologists would later find something familiar: carved faces with downturned lips, feline features, and intricate symbols that whispered of Olmec ancestry. The Zapotecs built their cities with the same sense of cosmic order. Pyramids aligned with the stars, plazas designed as mirrors of the heavens. They recorded time and ritual on carved stones called danzantes, figures that seemed to move, to speak. Though the Zapotecs no longer lived in the humid lowlands, they carried with them the Olmec idea that the universe was alive, that gods, humans, and nature were threads of the same sacred web. Far to the east, in the rainforests of the Yucatan and the valleys of Guatemala, another people rose, the Maya. They too inherited from the Olmec. From them came the sacred ball game, a ritual that symbolized life, death, and the movement of the sun. From them came the first hieroglyphic writing, which the Maya refined into a script of dazzling complexity. And from them came the concept of cyclical time, the belief that history repeated in endless spirals of creation and renewal. The Maya took these seeds and made them flourish. They charted the heavens with mathematical precision, predicting eclipses and the turning of Venus. They built cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Copan, filled with temples that rose like mountains of stone. When the Maya priests lifted their eyes to the stars, they were following the same cosmic map first traced by Olmec astronomers long before. Among all the symbols of the Olmec, none endured more powerfully than the jaguar. To the Olmec, it had been the bridge between the human and the divine, a creature of night, strength, and mystery. The Zapotecs painted it on urns. The Maya carved it into thrones. The Aztec, centuries later, would create entire warrior orders in its name. In every age, the jaguar reminded the people of Mesoamerica that the wild and the sacred were one, that power was not domination, but harmony with the unseen. Even as new gods were born and old names forgotten, the jaguar prowled through every myth, every city, every dream. The Olmec were not just dreamers. They were inventors. They gave Mesoamerica one of its first writing systems, the concept of the zero, and perhaps even the foundation of the long-count calendar. Their descendants, whether Zapotec, Maya, or Mixtec, expanded upon this knowledge, building vast systems of mathematics, architecture, and astronomy. The Olmec understanding of balance between sky and earth, sun and moon, creation and decay became the invisible blueprint for centuries of innovation. It was as if the Olmec spirit whispered through every stone wall and every glyph. Remember the pattern. Follow the rhythm of the world. Historians often call the Olmec the mother civilization, but this title hides something deeper. They did not rule an empire of soldiers or kings. Their empire was one of ideas, a web of influence stretching across time and geography. An Olmec potter teaching a child in a distant village how to mold clay carried that empire. A priest chanting the ancient names of the gods in a new dialect extended its borders. A farmer planting maize in rhythm with the lunar cycle continued its law. Through these quiet acts, the Olmec lived on, not in monuments or armies, but in memory and rhythm. Their greatness was not in domination, but in continuity. They became the silent foundation upon which others stood. Centuries later, the jungle began to whisper again. Explorers from distant lands would uncover the colossal heads buried in the earth, faces with calm eyes and powerful jaws, gazing eternally toward the horizon. The world would marvel at their size, at the mystery of their makers. Who carved them? How were they moved? What kingdom had they served? But to those who understood the rhythm of time, the answer was simple. The Olmec had never truly vanished. They had only become one with the land. Their art was the voice of the earth itself, patient, silent, eternal. Today, the spirit of the Olmec still hums beneath the soil of Mexico. In every festival, in every maize field, in every temple stone kissed by rain, their rhythm endures. They taught that civilizations are not measured by wealth or conquest, but by harmony, with the gods, the stars, and the living world. They taught that endings are beginnings in disguise. The Olmec did not vanish. They transformed into memory, into myth, into the heartbeat of Mesoamerica itself. And so, the giants still walk, not of flesh and stone, but of legacy. For centuries, the Olmec had lived in harmony with the rivers and forests of their homeland. They had built cities of stone and earth, carved faces that outlasted time, and created a legacy that stretched far beyond their borders. But even the most enduring civilizations must one day face the shifting rhythm of the world. Nature, which had once blessed the Olmec, began to change. The rains grew unpredictable. The rivers that once gave life now wandered from their courses. The fertile plains turned restless beneath their feet. This was the beginning of the time of shadows, a season of quiet transformation. It began slowly, almost invisibly. The mighty city of La Venta, once the shining heart of the Olmec world, began to lose its balance. Floods washed away crops. In other years, droughts withered the fields. The river shifted its path, leaving canals dry and farms stranded. Without stable harvests, the people faced uncertainty. The rituals that had once promised rain and abundance seemed to lose their power. Priests and rulers sought answers in the stars, in the caves, in the sacred mountains, but the signs were unclear. To the Olmec, these were not punishments but messages. Nature was speaking, reminding them that all life moves in cycles: creation, growth, decline, and renewal. The people listened, but the world around them continued to change. As the rivers moved and the soil weakened, the people of La Venta began to drift away. Families left in search of new lands, following rivers north and west. The city that had once echoed with music and prayer slowly grew silent. When the last fires burned out in its temples, the jungle began its quiet work. Roots crept over stone altars. The pyramid that had once touched the sky was swallowed by vines. And yet, the Olmec spirit did not vanish. It transformed, scattering like seeds on the wind, carried by those who left their homeland to begin anew elsewhere. The fall of La Venta was not the end, but a migration. Olmec artisans, traders, and priests carried their knowledge to new regions, to Tres Zapotes, Chalcatzingo, and beyond. There, they taught others how to carve, how to align temples with the stars, how to shape rubber and jade, how to read the sacred symbols of the cosmos. Each new land became a reflection of the old one. Villages rose with Olmec designs, plazas, mounds, and altars echoing the architecture of their ancestors. Their art continued to evolve, their language to spread, their beliefs to deepen. In this way, the Olmec never truly disappeared. They simply changed their form, from one great civilization into many small flames that would light the way for others. As the people moved, their understanding of the divine also changed. In the old heartland, the gods had lived in mountains and rivers. In the new lands, they found new faces, deities of wind and fire, of maize and dawn. But behind each name and image, the spirit of the Olmec remained. They still carved the jaguar, guardian of strength and mystery. They still honored the maize, symbol of life and rebirth. They still believed in the circle of time and the balance of all things. Even in decline, the Olmec carried wisdom, that no fall is final and no darkness is without light. As the centuries passed, other civilizations began to rise. In the highlands of Oaxaca, the Zapotecs built their first temples. In the rainforests of the Yucatan, the Maya began to study the stars. And in the valleys of central Mexico, small kingdoms emerged that would one day become mighty empires. All of them, in one way or another, inherited something from the Olmec: a carving style, a myth of creation, a belief that rulers could speak with the gods. Archaeologists would later call the Olmec the mother civilization, not because they ruled others, but because they nurtured them. They were the roots from which the great tree of Mesoamerican culture grew. From the outside, it might seem that the Olmec fell into silence. Their cities were abandoned, their monuments buried. But in truth, their end was a lesson, a reminder that no civilization is greater than the earth that sustains it. The Olmec had always known this truth. They built their world on balance, on respect for nature's rhythms. And when those rhythms changed, they adapted, moving with the flow instead of resisting it. Their wisdom was not in power or conquest, but in acceptance. They understood that every fall is a part of the greater cycle, the same cycle that governs the stars, the rains, and the beating of the human heart. By 400 years before Christ, the once great Olmec heartland had returned to forest. The colossal heads stood buried in earth, their faces calm and timeless. Generations passed, and the jungle kept their secrets. But their story was not forgotten. Every new temple built in Mesoamerica carried an echo of the Olmec spirit. Every calendar carved into stone, every god painted on a wall, was a whisper from the mother civilization. Even in silence, the Olmec were speaking. Through stone, through time, through the memory of the land itself. Time moved like the slow turning of the sun, unhurried, unending. Empires rose and fell, jungles reclaimed cities, and new generations forgot the names of the old gods. Yet, deep within the soil of Mesoamerica, the memory of the Olmec remained, sleeping, waiting to be rediscovered. When the Maya, the Zapotec, and later the Aztec looked to their origins, they spoke of ancient beings, of stone faces and sacred mountains. To them, these were not myths. They were history, the echo of a civilization that had once shaped the very soul of their world. They called them Tamoanchan, the place of beginnings. We call them the Olmec. Centuries after San Lorenzo and La Venta had fallen silent, the people of Mesoamerica still told stories of the first builders, the ones who carved stone like it was clay and drew power from the earth itself. The Aztec priests, in their towering temples of Tenochtitlan, spoke of an age before their own, an age of giants, of the Olmeca Xicallanca. In their myths, these beings were half human, half divine, the bringers of writing, mathematics, and sacred knowledge. When Aztec travelers stumbled upon the massive stone heads in the jungles of Veracruz, they did not see ruins. They saw the faces of gods. The ancients had not perished. They had become immortal. The Olmec left no empire of armies, but their monuments were their voice. Each colossal head, each carved altar, was a sentence in a language of eternity. To the later civilizations, these stones were sacred relics, proof that the land itself remembered. Aztec pilgrims journeyed to the Olmec heartland as others might visit holy shrines. They believed these ancient sculptures held divine energy, the essence of the world's creation. And perhaps they were right. Even now, when one stands before an Olmec head, its calm face weathered by centuries of rain, there is a strange presence in the air. It feels less like looking at a statue, and more like meeting a spirit. The Aztec Empire, centuries after the Olmec disappeared, considered itself the inheritor of a sacred past. They called themselves the people of the sun, yet in their temples and rituals, the Olmec legacy shone through. Their calendar stones, with circular carvings of gods and cosmic cycles, echoed the Olmec understanding of time. Their ritual ball games, played to honor life and death, traced back to the Olmec courts. Even their belief in the four suns, the idea that the world had been created and destroyed many times, mirrored the Olmec sense of eternal renewal. The Aztec priests believed the gods demanded offerings to maintain balance, the same philosophy that had guided the Olmec farmers who prayed for rain and fertility. To the Aztec, the Olmec were not forgotten ancestors. They were divine teachers. From the Yucatan to the Valley of Mexico, the invisible threads of Olmec influence stretched across time. In architecture, in sculpture, in the sacred patterns of city planning, echoes of the first civilization endured. When the Maya built stepped pyramids in harmony with the stars, that was Olmec geometry. When the Zapotecs aligned Monte Alban to mark solstices, that was Olmec astronomy. When the Aztec carved jade masks with feline features, that was Olmec symbolism. Every temple, every glyph, every ritual drumbeat carried the rhythm that had begun in the jungles of Tabasco and Veracruz. It was as if the Olmec had written not on paper, but into the very soul of Mesoamerica. For thousands of years, the Olmec vanished from human memory. Their names faded, their cities buried beneath centuries of soil and silence. Then, in the 19th century, a farmer near Tres Zapotes unearthed something astonishing. A colossal head of basalt, its face calm and noble. Archaeologists soon found more. Altars, figurines, jade ornaments, and remnants of vast ceremonial centers. The world was stunned. Who were these people who carved such monumental art at a time when much of the world still lived in simple tribes? How had they mastered architecture, astronomy, and trade so early? The answer slowly emerged. These were the Olmec, the first civilization of the Americas, the ones who had taught others to measure the heavens and listen to the earth. Their rediscovery reshaped our understanding of the ancient world. No longer was civilization born only in Egypt, Mesopotamia, or China. It had also risen, independently and magnificently, in the green heart of the New World. Today, the Olmec are seen not just as the ancestors of Mesoamerican culture, but as one of humanity's great innovators. Their ideas, balance, spirituality, cosmic harmony, transcend borders and centuries. They taught that progress does not come from conquering nature, but from living within it. They saw time not as a line, but as a circle, a rhythm that connects every beginning to its end. In their silent monuments, they left a message for all who would come after, that greatness lies not in power, but in understanding. The Olmec were humanity's quiet philosophers, speaking not through words, but through the eternal language of stone. The jungles of Veracruz whisper when the wind passes through them. It is said that if you listen closely, you can still hear the rhythm of drums, faint, distant, echoing through the centuries. They are the heartbeat of a people who once shaped a continent, whose cities fell silent, but whose spirit never died. This is the legacy of the Olmec, the first great civilization of the Americas. the stone giants whose memory still watches from beneath the earth. When archaeologists first uncovered the colossal stone heads, their faces calm, dignified, timeless, they realized something profound. The Olmec were not merely builders of monuments, they were builders of identity. Each sculpture, each artifact was more than art. It was a message to the future. It spoke of a people who understood the rhythm of nature, who saw divinity in rain and stone, and who believed that every creation, every act, every carving had a spirit. Even now, those colossal faces seem alive, not in movement, but in meaning. They remind us that civilization is not measured by conquest, but by connection, between humanity, the cosmos, and the sacred world around us. The Olmec did not vanish when their cities fell. They transformed. Their beliefs, their art, and their understanding of the universe flowed into the veins of the civilizations that followed. The Maya learned from their mastery of calendars and astronomy. The Zapotecs inherited their sense of sacred geometry. The Aztec carried forward their reverence for balance between life and the divine. Through these descendants, the Olmec spirit continued to breathe, shaping temples, rituals, and philosophies for nearly 3,000 years. In truth, every pyramid built in Mesoamerica, every glyph carved, every prayer spoken to the rain, was in some way an echo of the first dreamers of San Lorenzo and La Venta. What made the Olmec so extraordinary was not just what they built, but how they lived. They were among the first to recognize that progress depended on harmony, not domination. They organized cities that worked with rivers, not against them. They built monuments that aligned with the stars, not in defiance of them. Their spirituality, rather than demanding obedience, invited balance, a relationship between humankind and the sacred rhythms of the earth. In their world, gods were not distant rulers. They were reflections of the natural forces that shaped life. The rain, the maize, the sun, and the jaguar. All were sacred because they were necessary, not because they were feared. That lesson, that we are part of the world, not above it, remains as vital now as it was 3,000 years ago. When modern explorers uncovered the buried cities of the Olmec, they were astonished to find advanced engineering, art of breathtaking sophistication, and evidence of vast trade networks stretching across mountains and coastlines. The Olmec had traded jade from Guatemala, obsidian from the highlands, and seashells from distant shores, proof of a thriving, interconnected world long before modern nations existed. Each discovery told the same story. The Olmec were thinkers, creators, and travelers, the first to dream in stone. They had no written record that survived, yet their art became their language. It spoke across time, reminding every generation that creativity and faith can outlast empires. Today, in the towns of southern Mexico, festivals still echo ancient Olmec traditions. Masks carved for ritual dances still carry the features of jaguars and serpents. Farmers still bless the earth before planting maize, following the same rhythms that guided their ancestors. Even modern architecture and astronomy owe a quiet debt to the Olmec, to their alignment of cities with celestial cycles, to their mathematical ideas of zero and symmetry, to their vision that time moves not in a line, but in a circle. Their wisdom endures not only in museums and textbooks, but in the living culture of Mexico, in language, in faith, in art, and in the way people still look to the sky for answers. To stand before an Olmec monument is to stand at the edge of time itself. The eyes of the stone heads gaze across centuries with quiet understanding, as if they know that everything changes, and yet nothing truly ends. Their message is eternal, that greatness begins not with war or wealth, but with imagination, that humanity's truest strength lies in creation, in the ability to see meaning in the world and give it shape. The Olmec were the first to carve their dreams into stone, not to be worshipped but to be remembered, and in that memory they became immortal. The Olmec taught that time moves in cycles: creation, destruction, rebirth. Their civilization followed that rhythm too. From their beginnings beside the rivers, through their golden age, decline, and rediscovery, they became the first heartbeat of a much larger story, the story of all civilizations that would follow. And perhaps that is their greatest gift to us, the reminder that no culture ever truly disappears. Every stone, every song, every story continues, reshaped, reimagined, reborn. Like the river that once nourished their land, the Olmec legacy flows endlessly, carrying the past into the present and the present into the future. The sun rises over the jungles of Veracruz, just as it did 3,000 years ago. Mist rolls over the ruins, and the air hums with quiet energy. Somewhere beneath the soil, the stone giants still watch, not as relics of a lost world, but as reminders that every beginning leaves a mark, that even in silence, the dream of civilization endures. The Olmec were the first to awaken that dream, and because of them, humanity learned to reach for the stars while keeping its feet firmly upon the sacred earth. The dawn they began never truly ended.